Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 5th of December 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, part of the 2014 LCS contract from Riot Games for League of Legends pro players has leaked, and it's not looking pretty. Full discussion on this coming your way right about now. Esports site On Gamers has acquired a part of the Season 4 LCS contract for 2014, and the statements within it are not exactly making too many people happy. The part of the contract in question states that professional LCS players may not stream from a rather long list of titles, which seems to have been chosen by Riot themselves. The leaked section in particular stated that it was not okay to stream these games adjacent to streamed League of Legends content, which is something that you would think would mean that you just can't stream it in the middle of a League of Legends stream, which sounds a bit weird, but I'll explain why that's a problem in a minute. However, an update to the article stated that the LCS team shall ensure, during the terms of this agreement, its team members do not publicly stream gameplay of the titles set forth in Exhibit B. So that means ever, at all, in any capacity while under the terms of this contract. The list of games is a little odd to say the least and begins with pretty much everything Blizzard makes. Diablo franchise, StarCraft, Warcraft, World of Warcraft, and Hearthstone, although it doesn't specifically list Heroes of the Storm, although you could argue that is covered by that entire term. It also, of course, lists Dota 2, Heroes of Newerth, Rise of Immortals, since, you know, that's a big threat, Infinite Crisis, Dawngate, Solstice Arena, Realm of the Titans, Smite, and then things start to get a little bit weird. For instance, the list mentions Monday Night Combat, but not Super Monday Night Combat, which is a completely different game. Monday Night Combat is currently not played by anybody, so the chances of actually seeing that are fairly slim. It then goes on to list Warhammer Online Wrath of Heroes, a game that shut down months ago, Demigod, a game which has approximately 3 players and came out years ago, Fat Princess. Yes, you heard me correctly, Fat Princess, a game on the PlayStation 3 and also on the PlayStation Portable and PlayStation Vita. However, you can get away with streaming that one because that one's called Fat Princess Fistful of Cake, Make Your Contract Specific, Riot. Interestingly enough, Wargaming.net's games are also included, that's World of Tanks and World of Warplanes, and finally they also disallow the use of tobacco products, which is interesting because I wasn't aware that was illegal. Alcohol, by the way, is not listed in this, so there you go. Now, before I get into how ethical this is and what effect this is going to have and explain the situation, can I just point out how ridiculously inconsistent a list this is? It's really quite silly. So you've got Wargaming.net's games, right? They're not MOBAs or Dota clones, whatever you want to call them, but they are big free-to-play titles. So Riot's threatened by that. So they're saying, nope, can't promote that. However, Team Fortress 2 is not listed at all. You'd think that TF2 would be fairly prominent on that list. I mean, it is one of the most popular games on PC, and also one of the most popular free-to-play titles on PC. That's not there. As I mentioned earlier, the fact that Heroes of the Storm isn't listed is a little bit strange. Admittedly, it is a game that is, of course, not out yet, so they could add it later, but you'd think they want to cover their bases. Warhammer Online Wrath of Heroes has not existed for many months. That is a game that not only was it an absolute disaster, but was closed down in March 2013. So that's not much of a threat. It almost makes me think that this list of games was arbitrarily drawn up by a lawyer who had some sort of vague idea of what he was trying to target. And there's some really obscure stuff in here. Crasher by Puncher's Impact. Land of Chaos Online. Land of Chaos Online. That's an MMO. Not a very big one either, and yet you don't list, I don't know, Guild Wars 2, Lord of the Rings Online, DDO, PlanetSide. Where is the consistency in this list? Who made this? I really have to ask. It's very, very strange. I understand the idea of listing stuff like Dota 2. That makes perfect sense. But the rest of it is just bizarre. Alright. Now let's talk about the idea of actually doing this in the first place. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I went on a little Twitter rampage yesterday, because, hey, I like to do that. It's what Twitter's for. It's what Twitter is for. But let's look at both sides. So the LCS basically pays its players, yeah? Riot gives a salary to the players in the LCS, yeah? You could say that they are employees. You could say that they're sponsored. Legally, I would say that there's a big difference there, but that is beyond my pay grade and beyond my knowledge level. I would love to actually hear from Ultra David on this. I think this is something that is really within his ballpark. Regardless, they are paid by Riot a salary. The teams are. Now, once you're in LCS, you're bound by a set of rules, which, as far as I'm aware, having asked pretty much everybody around and getting the same answer or no answer at all, does not involve defined streaming hours. You do not have to stream for LCS. And there's a lot of LCS teams, of course, that don't. Streaming is something that teams require. Evil Geniuses would be a good example. They are well known for imposing streaming requirements upon their players in StarCraft 2. I do not know if that applies to League, but it would not surprise me if it did. Now let's look at the practical side of things. Why is this a big deal? Why are people up in arms about it? Well, before the addendum to the OnGamers article, which indicated the team said, nope, you can't stream at all, not just during League of Legends streams. You cannot stream these games at all, ever. What generally happens on these really high-end League streams is the queue takes a very long time to populate because you're in the so-called Challenger tier, yeah? And the Challenger tier is a circuit, yeah? It is a legitimate circuit. All of the teams in there are big. I go to the North American Challenger Circuit standings right now. I see TSM, CLG, Dignitas, Curse Gaming, another TSM team. It's big. It is a big deal. It is kind of the equivalent of Grandmaster within StarCraft 2, but also with a large component of the Challenger League from WCS. Yeah? This is official. If you're in there, you are competing for spots in LCS. It also means you are playing against teams with the highest of MMR. That means the queue can take a while. Sometimes 20 to 25 minutes in order to actually get a game, not to mention the time it takes to actually do your bans and things like that. There's a lot of that involved. That means that when you're streaming, you have large amounts of downtime. Unlike StarCraft 2, where you can usually get into a game in about a minute, even a GM, although sometimes it takes a little longer, these streams are taking ages for the most part. It varies, but they are taking a long time to get back into a game. So that means you've got about 45,000 people sitting in a stream waiting for you to do something, and what do a lot of the League players do? They fire up a different game. They fire up something that has shorter rounds. Hearthstone has been particularly popular amongst League streamers because you can do a round in maybe 5 to 10 minutes, which is pretty good. I would imagine TF2 would be ideal for them as well, although I don't know how many of them play it. And, of course, you could even think about StarCraft or something like that, or Diablo, or something like Path of Exile, which, strangely enough, is not listed, even though the Diablo franchise is. Penis envy, Riot? So strange that Long Dong Silver over there seems to be very self-conscious about his position within the industry. Regardless, this has been common practice, and in many ways, this particular stipulation shuts a lot of that down. That means it's more difficult for players to maintain interest from the audience, and it directly impacts the audience as well. Now, you could play other games, of course, which is why this list is very strange, because if they were objecting to the notion of the platform being used for the promotion of competition, then they would just say no other games. But they don't. They give this really weird specific list that is missing games that you'd think would be there. There's like no consistency in it whatsoever. And it's really hard not to look at this as a grandstanding move from Riot saying, yeah, we know who the competition is and we're going to specifically say, nope, you're not allowed to be involved in our streams in any way, shape, or form. We are going to shut you the hell out. I mean, the fact that they banned every Blizzard title in detail, that is the only publisher, by the way, that has more than 2 games on the list. The only one. Everything by Blizzard is listed, but only one Valve game is. TF2 is not. CSGO is not. Really, really odd. Okay. So let's look at the idea that they're right in doing this. Let's have a look at both perspectives. So here are the arguments. First argument, and this is actually being put out by Riot themselves. If you check out the OnGamers article, which you should read, by the way, it has a response from a Riot employee, the director of eSports specifically, by the name of Riot Magus, also known as Waylon Roselle. And he says this: "We say this all the time, we want League of Legends to be a legitimate sport. There are some cool things that come from that, which includes salaried professional athletes. But there's also a lot of structural work that needs to be done to ensure a true professional setting. In the past, pro gamers only had to worry about their personal brands when streaming, and at most may have had to worry about not using the wrong brand of keyboard to keep their sponsor happy. Now, however, these guys are professionals contracted to a pro sports league. When they're streaming to 50,000 fans, they're also representing the sport itself. He goes on to make comparisons to real sports. You won't see an NFL player promoting arena football or a Nike-sponsored player wearing Reebok on camera. Pro players are free to play whatever games they want. We're simply asking them to keep in mind on stream they're the face of competitive League of Legends. Sports. It's definitely been a word that's come out of Riot's mouth an awful lot. They don't even like the term esports. In fact, esport is only mentioned once within that entire statement. The word sport, on the other hand, is mentioned 4 times. I think it's blatantly obvious what the messaging is here, what the brand is from Riot. They've been pushing this sports aspect for a while, and in some respects, it's actually been a positive for the overall idea of esports. I don't want to say scene, because there isn't one. I don't want to buy into this idea of an esports scene. I watch StarCraft and sometimes Dota. I don't care about the rest of them. And I think I'm in the majority there. We don't talk about the sports scene, we talk about basketball or football. While Riot may have been able to get some people into the country under a sports athlete visa, this has not necessarily helped everyone, although it eventually might. It's obvious what they want to do here, and they're pushing this sports aspect in a big way. Now, they pay the players. They pay LCS players. So as far as I'm concerned, they can do whatever the hell they want. And this is legally true, I would imagine, as well as also, from their perspective, being ethically right. The LCS brand basically owns those teams, in a way. They put a lot of constraints on them. I believe it was last year, there were some murmurings from teams that there were a lot of restrictions being put on them, though nothing was ever leaked. A team wasn't really willing to come forward, because, hell, if you're outside of the LCS, then you're balked, for the most part. There isn't all that much for you to really compete in. It's the biggest. It is the big dog. And once you're in that system, then Riot owns you. There is no player association, there is no union for them to fight back in this case, and they don't really have much of a choice, because any team that refuses to play ball will be rapidly replaced by one that will. It's extremely difficult to pass up the amount of money that League is offering, and more to the point, the access to tournaments. If you're shut out of LCS, where do you go? Last year, I tweeted about rumors that Riot was attempting to force teams into a MOBA monopoly, as I was calling it there. Basically, you couldn't have a Dota 2 team if you had a League of Legends team. That's what they were trying to do. Apparently, and none of this is confirmed because a lot of this is really, really well hidden. It is behind the Iron Curtain. They folded under pressure from teams. So that certainly happened. But now they come along with this, and this time we actually have a piece of a contract to look at. We have some actual information to work with rather than hearsay, which in itself is fantastic for transparency, something that Riot, and indeed many other companies, I'm not saying it's just Riot, have been guilty of completely avoiding. Riot's perspective on this is the reason these streams are popular is because of the game that's being played. Ergo, those streams should not be used to promote other games. That's not that unreasonable. That is not an unreasonable thing to say. But after all of that, after me basically saying, yeah, they're doing what's well within their rights, they're protecting their brand, they are growing sports, as it were. I mean, we're not even using the term esports apparently now, we're using sports. There is a counter-argument, and a pretty damn strong one at that. Firstly, practicality. This is what we were talking about earlier. The reason these games get played, especially games like Hearthstone with the shorter rounds, is because of the length of queue time for a lot of these players. This is something that Riot has not fixed, but then again, can they? We're talking about the highest possible MMR. So it is going to take a while to queue. It's going to take even longer to do bans and things like that because these games are serious. This point system actually matters in some way. In order to entertain the viewers, these streamers had to resort to playing other games or doing other things. Playing other games is the easiest way to do it. It keeps them interested. It also breaks up the monotony. It's nice. It's a little bit of variety, and it really helps strengthen these players as personalities. Speaking from the perspective of someone that has a very popular stream and also a very popular YouTube channel, the idea of seeing a pro player play a different game, something that's a little bit out of their comfort zone, is extremely appealing, and it's something that I've benefited from in the past, even though I'm not a pro gamer. I am a professional critic, but playing different games really brings people in. An example would be when I played SimCity, I had 38,000 concurrent viewers watching me build a city. That was something a little bit different. People are not used to seeing me do that. At that point, I was streaming mostly StarCraft 2, so changing things up a bit really helped me as a streamer. It helped me grow my business. This applies to pro gamers even more than that, in my opinion, because people are very curious. You see them play League of Legends. Ooh, they're pro at League of Legends. I wonder how good they are at other things. That's really interesting. That's a compelling piece of content for viewers. You're denying that. Not only are you denying that during a stream, you're denying that in total. That's the next point. The idea that they can't stream any other game on their off time in any way. Assuming that it's on the list. And it's so weird that they would just say on the list. It makes more sense just to ban all of them. Because what's so wrong about promoting Counter-Strike Go instead of Dota 2 or Team Fortress 2? Probably a better comparison would be an MMO, yeah? The fact that there's, I think, only 2 MMOs on that list, that being Land of Chaos Online and World of Warcraft. Why can we promote the other MMOs and not those ones? Why Land of Chaos Online? It's so strange. There's no consistency there. I'd still hate it if they banned the games outright, but it would make more sense than this. The fact of the matter is that Riot believes they have built these personalities. They are responsible for the success of these players. And I beg to differ. I hate the idea of content producers being devalued by devs and publishers, and the community in general. You know, that happens an awful lot. The community loves to think that they are responsible for the success of people that put the work in, but in reality, it's the guys that worked hard to do it. Those pro players are responsible for their own success. LCS simply amplifies that success. The participation in these big tournaments makes them more popular, but it didn't build their popularity from the start. It's not true in all instances, but it is true in most. What a contract like this is saying to a player is, you are our product. We are responsible for your success. You are nothing without us, so act like it. And that is unbelievably disrespectful to the people that have basically dedicated their lives to your game. That's what they've done. That's what a pro League of Legends player is. They can't do anything else. Now, I'd like to tackle the idea of sports comparisons. Can we throw those out of the window immediately? Last I checked, most sports players do not sit there 8 hours a day broadcasting their practice for the internet. It is a bollocks comparison. The analogy is completely fallacious. We are eSports. This is a brand that we have been pushing. Everyone's been pushing this idea of eSports, and eSports does things differently. We are not the same as sports. Do we want to be? Would we want to be as litigious as the NFL? No, absolutely not. There is so much wrong with that model. Yes, it's highly successful, don't get me wrong, but do we have to be successful by following the old? I've said this many times before over the last few months. It's becoming one of my favorite catchphrases, but it's this: stop chasing the guys that are already behind you. This is a streaming revolution. This is an on-demand online revolution. This is something different. This is something that people didn't think was possible 5 years ago. And yet here we are. Why do we not follow that? Why do we not forge our own path instead of trying to emulate what came before? Learn from the mistakes of pro sports. Don't be in such a hurry to repeat them. Unlike the carefully managed images of players, our pros, are personalities on and off the court. Consistently. There's an unprecedented level of access to these professionals, the kind of thing which never happens with real sports. The ability to go and play another game and really build yourself as a brand on your own strengthens League of Legends. These streamers have an amazing identity. There's a reason why League of Legends is the game that gets watched the most on Twitch. It's the one game that I can't compete with when it comes to stream numbers. I can't do it. It's so popular. I mean, I've seen guys with 50,000 plus viewers. It's crazy. That's amazing concurrent views. Really good. Allow them to continue to build that, and allow them to use whatever tools they feel is necessary to do that. That's perhaps the most important part. These guys are making decisions based on what they believe their audience wants to watch. That's strengthening them as brands, and it strengthens League of Legends by making sure it is consistently the most watched game on Twitch in a game that is continuing to grow. What the hell is Riot afraid of? That's what I've got to ask. I mean, the penis envy here seems ridiculous, but they got the biggest schlong in the room. It's huge. They're waving it around. Women faint. Men faint. The breeze generated by that swinging schlong is enough to knock over small children. That is how big these guys are. You are well endowed. I don't know what the hell happened to you when you were younger, but guys, you are well endowed. You have nothing to prove at this point. If you eventually get beaten out of the market, it will have nothing to do with the fact that a TSM player decided, you know what, I'm going to play Hearthstone in my downtime. It's going to have nothing to do with that. It will be because someone came along and did it better, and no amount of this kind of broadcast restriction is going to help you. It seems to me that they're hiding behind arbitrary sports comparisons and analogies instead of being brave enough to actually build things on their own. And let's be fair, they've built a lot on their own, so why stop now? Why say, oh yeah, the NFL does it better? No, you've pretty much proven that you do it pretty well. Those Season 3 finals blew everything else out of the water, and I say that as someone that hates watching League of Legends competitively and absolutely adores watching StarCraft and Dota 2 competitively. You are the biggest. You are right at the top here. You have created the best event of all time, and you'll probably continue to do that. I've made no secret of my dislike for Riot, and the reason I dislike them is because they lied to me. Long time ago, I was involved with the referrals program. This is way before the current one, when League of Legends was a lot smaller. I made one of the most popular League of Legends videos ever on YouTube, ever. It's got almost 3 million views, if I recall correctly. It was just an introduction to League of Legends a long time ago, and I referred a lot of people. Before the system changed over, I believe it was about 27,000, and I was actually one of the only people, out of 4 if I recall correctly, that hit that magic 10,000 referral amount. The reward for that was Design a Champion. That was the word, Design a Champion. That's what it had written down right there. Never happened. Something that never happened. It was a big disappointment, and I felt lied to. So you might think that that is petty, that it's immature, but I don't think that a company that did that to you would be given the benefit of the doubt in future. Once bitten, twice shy, and as a channel that does this kind of thing professionally, I understand the value of those referrals. I really do. I understand how many companies would kill for the number of referrals that I actually gave that, even though it sounds, and it is, in the long run, a drop in the ocean compared to the ludicrous numbers that that game has. But back then, they didn't actually have those ludicrous numbers. It was a much smaller game that was still very much in the running with Heroes of Newerth for dominance. That's why I don't like Riot, because they lied to me. And I don't think that's something I'll ever fully get over. But if any of you try to make the argument that I'm biased against Riot on this, please consider this. This is great for me. It's fantastic. You kidding me? Like, as someone that streams Hearthstone and makes very popular Hearthstone content on YouTube, the fact that pro gamers are not going to be playing it is phenomenal. Less competition. Wonderful. I never watch League of Legends streams, so it doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it's better for me. Yeah, this is a net positive for me. But like any other decent human being, we also are supposed to have empathy for our fellow man and who this actually does affect. League of Legends stream fans and professional gamers. And I'm certainly not okay with either of those guys getting screwed over. Riot is a company that for the past couple of years has been trying to exert an increasing amount of control, not only over League of Legends, but over what it classifies as eSports. But the problem is, it's been doing so under the guise of helping eSports, the grand scene, the idea of eSports. The supporters have continually said a rising tide lifts all ships. Cross-pollination. Look at how wonderful, how strong the scene is becoming as a result of this. And yet there is no actual cooperation. And what really bothers me, I think, outside of anything, is the repeated cries for supporting eSports from a company that really means support League of Legends. And if they just said that, you know what, I'd be fine. Do not talk about grand ideas like expanding eSports and growing the scene. Talk about growing League. Because then I can understand a lot of these moves. I really can. These are moves that are to help you as a company. They are not to help the scene, they are to help your scene. Or more specifically, your interpretation of what you believe the scene should be. Because unquestionably, this damages the current state of League of Legends scene. Net negative in that respect, because you are having a negative impact on stream viewers and a negative impact on professional streamers. The funny thing is, I don't think this will even have a negative impact on what it's really aiming at. Let's look between the lines here and say, oh yeah, Hearthstone's a threat. World of Tanks is a threat. Dota 2 is a threat, so we don't want it promoted on our streams. And it's still pretty understandable. This is why this is a difficult thing. This is why this is a really difficult issue, because it is understandable from that perspective. But I would just like some bravery from one of the pioneers of modern esports. I would like those guys to say, you know what? Actually, we're not afraid of these people because we believe our game is good enough on its own merits, and we also understand that the streaming scene is uncharted territory. It is a new form of entertainment that doesn't have a past template to work with. It doesn't have previous history to look at. It's the kind of thing that we need to just take as it goes, and stifling parts of that as it continues to grow is just a bad idea for everybody. That's what I want to see from them. I think they have the guts to do it. I really do. They certainly have the money to do it, and they have little reason to be afraid of these other titles. Above all, however, I ask them to respect their professional players and do not devalue them by saying, we built you, we are the reason, and we own you. Because I think you'll be quite surprised just how much clout these people have, and what a pity it would be if they decided to abandon you en masse. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch, and I'll see you next time.